Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Trail Tidbits, a Volquest.com mini recruiting podcast. I'm Eric Kane alongside Matt Ray. Tennessee, fresh off the bye, back at home. This long extended homestand continues, and that's refreshing because Tennessee was away from home for about a month long earlier in the season. But back at home, Kentucky coming to town, and it's time to take a look at some of the bigger names, and Tennessee's continuing to try to iron out the class of 25, looking ahead, of course, to 26s. Been a lot of great 26s on campus here lately, and even some 27s. Matt, let's start with a couple of guys who are committed elsewhere. First, a running back for the Mid-States, Southern Cal commit, the Juan Morris.
Yeah, we've talked about him, it seems like, for months, Eric, and the vibe has just continued to be, will the Juan Morris get to campus? Well, this week he openly came out and said on social media on Tuesday afternoon that he's planning to return to Tennessee. The Vols have continued to recruit him, despite the commitment to USC. Darrell Sims was out to see him this past Friday, and, those two have stayed in contact. And I think DeJuan Morris comes into this weekend's visit just kind of with open eyes, looking to learn a little bit more about the Tennessee program, how he can be used. I think right now, if you're Tennessee, you've got a lot to sell him, right? USC is obviously struggling at this point in the season, but you've got Dylan Sampson, who has, been electric, through this first half of the season. And, I think DeJuan Morris has paid attention to that. I think if you're Tennessee, you've got a lot to talk about with him, and you try to catapult this into an official visit down the line as it gets closer to signing day. Obviously Tennessee will have one more weekend of visits where they could potentially get him back there late in November, to try to use an official visit to push this one to the finish line. But USC has coveted DeJuan Morris for some time. They pressed hard for him in the summer, which led to him committing there. But, ultimately other SEC schools have hung around, Auburn in the picture at one time. But Tennessee's just stayed consistent. And I think, credit Darrell Sims in saying we want to add another back in this class. And, DeJuan Morris has been that guy for Tennessee, and they've not gone away. So you got to get him back to campus. It's kind of been what we've said for some time, and it appears Tennessee's in shape to get him back to campus this week. Its communication's been really good here for the last 2 weeks. So if Tennessee can get him to campus, then things can really start to pick up pace, as this is a big visit for the Vols, and certainly probably the most notable visit of the weekend, in my opinion.
Again, yeah, I mean, it's been for quite some time. It's not real until he at least sets foot on campus. It's going to happen. At least we think it's going to happen. So that's obviously something to pay attention to. Like Tennessee's defensive backfield class for this class of 25, but a guy that they coveted for quite some time and talked to a little bit is a current Miami commit, and that's Timothy Merritt. What's the latest with Timothy Merritt?
Yeah, obviously he let it out on social media that he had made the trip to Knoxville for the Alabama game. That was one that was kept quiet, kind of kept under the radar, but he did make it back to Tennessee. And, down the stretch, I think he really just is focused on Tennessee and Miami, and that's kind of where his recruitment was in the summer. He committed to the Hurricanes in the middle of June. And, he still came up to Tennessee that following week and took an official visit. And he said then that he was going to – he told me pretty much immediately after committing to Miami that he would be still on campus at Tennessee the following week. He showed up. He feels like he's got a strong relationship with the staff. And he just kind of wanted to continue going through the process with those two schools. And that's where it's been. Another guy that Tennessee's never gone away with. Tim Banks, Coach Chop. Both of those guys have done a really good job of just continuing to recruit Tim Merritt the same way that they did before he committed. I think going into June official visits and really before he kind of surprised a lot of people, I felt like Tennessee was in the best spot for Tim Merritt. He and I had some, discussions just kind of where his recruitment was, and his best relationship appeared to be, to me, at least on the surface, at Tennessee because of Coach Chop and Coach Banks. And those two guys have continued to recruit him. Coach Chop out to see him last week when Tennessee was on the road, and he's maintained good contact with Tennessee since. We'll see if he makes it back before the end of the season. I think it's something that, he could go back and forth on, or he could just kind of sit back and say, look, I've seen both of these places a lot. I've seen it on official visits. I've seen it for game days. I know what both places have to offer me in terms of the football side of things from the defensive backfield. He knows that he can play multiple spots in either secondary. So we'll see where things go with Tim Merritt moving forward, but he's one that Tennessee's covered and that they would certainly add to this defensive back class at some point if he wanted in.
Gotta love some of that film work there, shooting from inside the press box, inside the windows there. Huddle's always a ride. So a couple of guys Tennessee's looking to flip, we just went over. A guy that Tennessee's desperately trying to hang on to, and a really good linebacker that we talked about so many times, but we'll continue to because it's a week-by-week thing. Georgia is not going away. What do you have for us this week on Tennessee linebacker commit Christian Gass?
Georgia's not going away for Christian Gass. I mean, Kirby Smart out to see Christian Gass this past week. Obviously, flew in the helicopter. Lands to see him. He's all over the area down there in the helicopter. But for Christian Gass, still a really strong relationship with Tennessee. Obviously he had the comment to On3's Jeremy Johnson that he's locked in with the Vols, but nothing's over until it's over. And that's pretty true messaging, Eric. I mean, that's kind of what we've said. Tennessee's just continued to do an excellent job with Christian Gass. On all phases, getting him back to campus both of those weeks that they were able to get him back. In October, we'll see if they're able to get him back here in November. With it being a night game, it certainly works in their favor. That's something that he's talked about. He wants to be at Tennessee as much as he can. He loves the staff. He loves the city. He loves being around the players currently on the roster. And if you're Tennessee, it would be big to get him back because Georgia's going to try to get him back to campus when the Vols come to town in November. And that could potentially end up being his last visit before signing and enrolling at the school of his choice. But I continue to think today that Tennessee sits in a good spot with him. But it's hard to discount Georgia. They're less than a 45-minute drive away, and they're going to swing until the end. Now, they added another linebacker to their class this week, this past week in Anthony Crua. They flipped him from North Carolina. But from my understanding, they still want to add a guy like Christian Gass. And it's because of what you see on film right here. It's the versatility. It's the ability to be a three-down linebacker, play multiple spots, impact the game in special teams. Just not a lot of guys with a frame and the ability to do what Christian Gass does. So, Georgia's not going to go away. But if you're Tennessee, we say it every week that we talk about him or Jaden Harmon or Shady Hayward, whoever it might be, those are the recruitments you want to be involved in. You don't want to have guys that, are committed and nobody else is coming after, nobody else, wants. And then you really want the Georgias and the Alabamas and the Miamis of the world, the teams that are in the playoff picture along with you, to want your recruits. That means you're on to something, right? So it was never going to be a laydown for Christian Gass or a bulk of Tennessee's class, but Gass specifically, Georgia has known that they were not ever going to lay down until the very end, and that's just kind of where we continue to be with things, and we'll see if he makes it back to campus this weekend. I think there's a chance that he could.
Yep, he committed to Tennessee. We've been watching it ever since. We'll continue to watch this one as we enter the month of November with signing day coming up in December. A guy that was committed to Clemson, decommitted, came on an official visit to Tennessee here in recent weeks. Isaiah Campbell, top 50 player overall in the country. Feels like Tennessee made a really, as you mentioned before, feels like Tennessee did a really, really good job with that one.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like coming out of the official visit. Obviously, he talked to Austin Price coming out of that visit that things went really well. I mean, I talked to Isaiah Campbell at length before the official visit, and when you start listening to him talk and everything that he's going to look at, if you go read that visit preview and then you go listen to him talk afterwards, it all lines up. It feels like Tennessee hit the boxes that they need to. Hit with a guy like Isaiah Campbell, who is just an elite player, on all fronts, a guy that can do multiple things in Tennessee's front, can play multiple techniques, can play as a big, strong side defensive end, but can kick inside on pass rush situations, just really dynamic, really versatile. I think Tennessee has continued to do a really good job there since the official visit. Rodney Garner was out to see him, play last week. But North Carolina, close by, has continued to recruit him really, really hard as well. They're trying everything they can do to make sure that he takes the official visit there. And I don't think he's decided on if he's going to take that visit or not. I think there's a very good possibility that he ends up taking that visit. And if he does, then this is one of those recruitments that'll go right down until signing day. I continue to think Tennessee's done, as well as they could do. But certainly something to watch with Isaiah Campbell in North Carolina. I think the more that you talk to people, the more that it's pretty apparent that if North Carolina's program was in better shape, then they'd be a very, very real threat in this one. But I think they're very much in play, just due to proximity to home and the comfort level with a lot of the staff. Clemson is obviously the third school that he continues to mention. He was committed there at one point. He's got good relationships there with Nick Eason and Dabo Sweeney's staff, but it doesn't feel like they're as much of a threat right now as the calendar gets to flip over to November. But it's going to be an exciting month of Isaiah Campbell watch here down the stretch for Tennessee.
So we looked at some 25s, some flip candidates. Of course, one of your commits that you're desperately trying to hang on to, and then a defensive lineman that's been at the top of Tennessee's board for the last couple of weeks for sure. Let's look at the 26s, two here to end off Trail Tidbits. Let's start with the running back, who's top 25 player in the country, Savon Haider, really, really good player that Tennessee's making a priority in this class at tailback. Yeah,
Tennessee's making Savon Haider a priority in this class at tailback. And listen, if you go turn the film on for this guy, he can go. Just tremendous balance. The ability to run through tackles, the ability to play out in space, catch passes out of the backfield, a three-down back, a guy that's coveted by some of the best, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, obviously Tennessee, several other schools continuing to try to be involved there with Haider. But this is a big visit for Tennessee. They've been trying to get him to campus for some time. He told me on Monday night that the plan is to make his way to Knoxville. He's continued to bond very well with Darrell Sims. Those two have continued, to have good conversation and hit it off. But Tennessee just hasn't been able to get him here from Virginia. But it feels like this visit this week is going to happen. And it's a big one for the Vols. And they wanted to reiterate to Haider how much of a priority he is. And that's why Tennessee coaches, while they were out on the road last week, Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley were in the state of Virginia and checked on Haider, Darius Gray, and some others in the area. But Haider and Gray are two in the state of Virginia that are big-time targets for the Vols in the 2026 class. So to get him here this weekend, get one of these last game day visits of the fall for him as he kind of gears up, to make a decision in the summer when those official visits to most likely all five of the schools that he's looking at still will take place. I think the plan for him is to take all five official visits. This is big for Tennessee. It's an important weekend for them to be able to showcase, again, a guy like Dylan Sampson on the field, kind of that product, that vision that they have for him, and to be around the staff more and experience the atmosphere. It's another night at Neyland. It's going to be, a dark mode, a blackout for Tennessee. So, as much as we talk about Alabama and, Florida in terms of recruiting, Tennessee has done really well recruiting with any games at night. They put a good product out in terms of kind of the pageantry around the stadium and the experience. And you're going to see Neyland at night, probably hear the spooky Rocky Top and get the full experience if you're Savon Haider. So I think this is a big week.
And finally, we'll end on talking about another really, really talented player, a priority in the class of 2026, a top 20 player nationally, top 10 in the On3 rankings. That is wide receiver from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Tristan Keys.
Yeah, I think Tristan Keys came out of the Florida visit probably as high on the Vols as, he was at any school at that point. He was just glowing, kind of ear to ear, talking about everything that he saw. He had spent the night before on the road up in North Carolina watching Faison Brandon play. Those two were kind of connected at the hip. We talked about that, during, the Trail Tidbits the following week. Those two have really hit it off. They like the idea of playing football together. Faison's continued to be in his ear, and Keys really wanted to come back to Knoxville for the Alabama game the following week. It was his birthday weekend, so he, decided to stay home, be around family. But he has been intentional in learning more about Tennessee's program, their offense, learning more about Faison Brandon, and kind of where things stand with him and that relationship. And he's going to be back at Tennessee this weekend, or at least right now, that is the plan. He's kind of had this date circled since that Florida game. And this is another visit for Tennessee to continue building momentum here. It's a who's who offer list for Tristan Keys, but the Vols are very much in play here. All the things that I just mentioned, but the relationship with Josh Heupel, Kelsey Pope, Joey Halsley is tremendous for Tristan Keys. He likes everybody around the building in Knoxville, around the program, and he loves what he's seen on the field from the Vols to this point. Not all things line up, but he saw Tennessee taking shots. He saw those big physical receivers getting the opportunity to go down, the field and make plays. Even when they don't connect, it's still important to see those things, when the eyes of a recruit, and he was able to see those things against Florida. He'll have a chance to see them again against Kentucky. But I think the most important thing for him is, does he maintain this winter decision timeline? Because if he does, Tennessee's got a chance to really build significant momentum with him. He's hinting around making a decision in late December, early January, and if he does, this visit's going to be big for the Vols. So it's definitely a point of emphasis for him as well this weekend as he's back to learn more about the program.
He is Matt Ray. I am Eric Kane. We do it every single Wednesday here at Volquest.com. It is a mini podcast on recruiting called Trail Tidbits. Tennessee returns home from the bye week. It's had a couple really, really good recruiting weekends, a couple of close, great environment wins over rivals in Florida and Alabama. And now we'll play in the latest rendition of the Border Bowl at Neyland Stadium, and some recruits will be on hand to watch that. And, of course, recruits paying attention to Tennessee from afar. Matt Ray, Austin Price will have it all covered for you. Everybody that's going to be on campus this weekend, they'll talk to them leading up to the visits. They'll talk to them leaving campus, all that. Some really good 26s, as Matt just pointed out, and we'll have all the coverage for you at Volquest.com. Matt, as always, appreciate it, buddy. Thank you guys, as always, for listening and watching to us here at Volquest.com. It's called Trail Tidbits.